Jack Nicholson is one of the most legendary actors in Hollywood history, known for his unforgettable performances in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Shining, and Batman. With an unparalleled career spanning over 6 decades, Nicholson became a cultural icon, winning multiple Academy Awards and delivering some of the most iconic moments in cinema. But in recent years, he has completely disappeared from the public eye, leaving fans wondering about his health, retirement, and what really happened to him. Today we take a deep dive into the life and tragic ending of Jack Nicholson, his rise to fame, his legendary career, and the heartbreaking truth behind his later years. Born on April 22, 1937, in the seaside town of Neptune City, New Jersey, Jack Nicholson entered this world with 2 major assets: a knack for drawing attention and a family situation that was already complicated enough to fill a tabloid. His mother, June Frances Nicholson, was a showgirl who found herself pregnant at just 17. To avoid the scrutiny of the time, the family devised a scheme worthy of a twisted soap opera plot. They decided that Jack would be raised by his grandparents, who would pretend they were actually his parents. Meanwhile, his mother, June, would be known to him as his older sister. This arrangement succeeded in shielding him from the truth, at least for a while. What the family probably didn't anticipate was that Jack would one day become so outrageously famous that no secret could remain buried forever. But if you think that's odd, well, that was only the opening act in the bizarre, flamboyant carnival that is Jack Nicholson's life. Let's fast forward a bit to Jack's youth. Long before he swaggered onto the big screen and into the hearts of millions, Nicholson was simply a mischievous boy in school, the kind who would be crowned class clown by his peers and then hustle his way into after-school detention nearly every day. He burned with an energy that wasn't easily contained. Anyone who met him at that age would say he was like a walking powder keg of comedic potential, always on the verge of cracking a joke, making a face, or mimicking someone's voice. A class clown isn't always the teacher's favorite, but the irreverence Nicholson developed in his youth would later become his comedic weapon on screen. One small twist in that period was his friendship with a certain Danny DeVito, another future icon who shared Nicholson's New Jersey roots and comedic spark. They joked, they got into trouble, they likely made teachers rub their temples in frustration. And they had no idea that down the road they'd both be in Hollywood, navigating fame and forging entire careers that would influence generations. Once he managed to graduate, Nicholson didn't waste much time pondering a typical career. He was drawn to Hollywood like a moth to a neon flame, but he didn't start in front of the camera right away. Instead, he took a job at the animation department of Hanna-Barbera, the legendary studio responsible for cartoons like the Flintstones. This could have been a comfortable stepping stone, a creative environment, stable employment, maybe a shot at voice acting. But that restless energy inside him just wouldn't settle. He craved the spotlight and yearned to inhabit worlds beyond his own. So he signed up at the Players Ring Theater to study acting, inching ever closer to the dream of making it in movies. Bit parts in soap operas came his way, and he treaded the stage in small productions. Then in 1958, at the tender age of 21, a stroke of luck. A film role landed in his lap, and he found himself cast as the lead in a low-budget production called The Cry Baby Killer. If this were a simpler Hollywood story, you'd hear something like, the film was a smash success, Nicholson became a household name, and the rest was history. But life wasn't that kind to him. The Cry Baby Killer flopped, so much so that Nicholson was left reeling from the experience. He felt he'd bitten off more than he could chew, or that the industry might not be ready for him, or maybe that he simply wasn't ready for it. Disillusioned, he stepped away, determined to go find himself. And as cliches often prove, searching for oneself can lead to unexpected rewards. In Nicholson's case, it led him to meeting Roger Corman, the film's producer, who would end up becoming Nicholson's mentor. Though his first outing was rocky, Nicholson found in Corman a champion who continued to cast him in low-budget fare, films like The Little Shop of Horrors and The Terror, that allowed him to refine his craft. He learned about comedic timing, how to deliver a line in just the right tone of menace or irony, and how to capture the audience's eye with subtle expressions. Essentially, he was honing that trademark Nicholson vibe that would later enthrall viewers worldwide. But for nearly a decade, that breakout, star-making role stayed just out of reach. Then came Easy Rider, a cult phenomenon in the making, directed by Dennis Hopper and starring Peter Fonda. Nicholson wasn't even first choice for the part that would eventually skyrocket him to fame. Legend has it, Hopper originally had the brilliant but mercurial actor Rip Torn in the cast. However, an explosive argument, apparently fueled by personal animosities, led Torn to abandon ship. Enter Jack Nicholson, stepping into the role of the boozy, charming lawyer George Hanson. Though he wasn't a leading man in that film, Nicholson's presence nearly stole the entire show. Critics glowed, fans took notice, and for the first time he was up for an Oscar, Best Supporting Actor. He didn't win that year, but it was a sign of bigger, better things on the horizon. Little by little, Nicholson was slipping into the Hollywood elite circle. Yet being part of Tinseltown's in crowd in the late 1960s could be a terrifying ride. Just months after Easy Rider's release, Nicholson's friend Roman Polanski suffered an unthinkable tragedy when members of the Manson family murdered Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate. Nicholson was shaken by the horror of it all, not just because of the closeness to Polanski, but the creeping realization that fame could make one a target in all sorts of dark, unexpected ways. During that grim period, Nicholson took to sleeping with a hammer beneath his pillow, proof that his roguish swagger didn't entirely mask a genuine concern for his own safety. Hollywood had always been glamorous, but now Nicholson saw a more ominous side to it. Fear, of course, wasn't the only challenge Nicholson confronted. He grappled with another worry, the thought of appearing nude in a film. It was a genuine source of anxiety for him, an odd hang-up for a guy known for so brazenly flaunting convention. To conquer that phobia, Nicholson embarked on a bizarre personal experiment. He spent 3 whole months lounging around his home in absolutely nothing. Visitors, friends, even family members, like his daughter, could walk in and find him as free of clothing as the day he was born. It was his way of forcing himself to become comfortable with nakedness. And eventually, yes, he overcame that fear enough to do nude scenes on camera, though it's perhaps overshadowed by more memorable things he did in front of a lens. One of those more memorable moments was, of course, his showdown with a waitress in 5 Easy Pieces. If you haven't seen it, imagine Nicholson's character Bobby Dupay, a moody intellectual disguised as a working-class stiff wanting a simple side order of toast that the waitress refuses to serve him. So he improvises a cunning request that includes holding the chicken salad between her knees or some equally comedic arrangement. The scene is iconic because it crystallized Nicholson's brand of rebellious wit. Both he and co-star Karen Black earned Oscar nominations for that film, though only Black emerged victorious. Regardless, that single scene with the stubborn waitress has been etched into cinematic memory, and it was enough to make a certain Shirley MacLaine declare that she'd love to act alongside him, a wish she'd fulfill later in terms of endearment. But Nicholson's upward trajectory wasn't always smooth. The 1970 Academy Awards saw him competing against Robert Redford, who was nominated for The Sting. Nicholson had famously turned down The Sting, preferring to star in The Last Detail, which also earned him a nod. Neither he nor Redford clinched the Oscar, though, as Jack Lemmon walked away with the trophy. All the same, Nicholson was recognized as a force to be reckoned with, which meant the media started sniffing around his personal life. That was when the skeletons in his family closet started to rattle. Researchers at Time magazine discovered the truth that Nicholson's sister June was actually his mother, and his parents were in fact his grandparents. They phoned him to let him know. It's a testament to his self-control that he took the revelation calmly. Both his mother and grandmother had already passed away by then, so he never had the chance to question them. Yet he'd later reflect that discovering this twist in his personal history had done little to rattle him. Perhaps by that stage in his life, Nicholson had grown accustomed to the unexpected. He was also growing increasingly fussy about the roles he accepted. Take The Sting, for example. He'd turned down that, and it became a massive success for Redford. He was also considered for parts in some major blockbusters, including sci-fi ventures like Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The idea of starships overshadowing his performance didn't sit well with him, so he passed. This is something Nicholson would mention more than once. He preferred to be the center of gravity in his movies, not special effects. He wanted roles that spotlighted his knack for nuance, unpredictability, and those famous devilish quirks. And indeed, that desire led him to a role that would forever define him, Randall McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Adapting Ken Kesey's novel was no small feat, and rumor has it, Stephen King, though he didn't write that book, he had opinions about casting in general, initially questioned Nicholson's involvement. Regardless, Nicholson's performance was mesmerizing. It had elements of defiance, humor, and vulnerability that left audiences and critics in awe. Finally, in 1975, the stars aligned and Nicholson clinched his first Best Actor Oscar. That was the moment he catapulted into Hollywood's upper echelon, never to return to those B-movie roots. Behind the scenes, though, Nicholson hadn't exactly lost his rebellious streak. He clashed with Milos Forman, the director of Cuckoo's Nest. Word has it that Nicholson, irritated by certain directorial choices, would conduct his own private rehearsals with his co-stars. You might imagine the tension that created, but Nicholson wasn't the type to apologize for such defiance, and in the end, he walked away with the highest acting honor in the business, a testament to the possibility that sometimes genius thrives under friction. Shortly after, he found himself standing toe-to-toe with Marlon Brando in The Missouri Breaks. Nicholson had idolized Brando for years, but working with one's idol can be tricky, and the two men's acting styles never harmonized. Rumor says they filmed many scenes separately to minimize tension, and the film itself fizzled at the box office. One can only imagine Nicholson's sense of disappointment. Still, that didn't stop him from carrying on his unstoppable momentum. Throughout the 70s, he built a reputation as an actor who could morph from drama to dark comedy with ease, from quiet introspection to unhinged intensity. And along the way, he indulged in the Hollywood lifestyle with a voracious appetite. By 1977, Nicholson's name found itself connected to a scandal involving Roman Polanski, who was staying at Nicholson's home to do a photo shoot with a 13-year-old girl. Nicholson, conveniently or inconveniently, was away at the time, but that hardly mattered in the eyes of the press. Polanski, of course, ended up facing legal repercussions, fleeing the country, and the entire ordeal cast an uncomfortable shadow on Nicholson's personal life. He insisted he had no clue what was going on. Whether or not that's true, the very mention of his property being involved made for salacious headlines. While controversies swirled around him, Nicholson prepared to film The Shining, directed by Stanley Kubrick and adapted from a Stephen King novel. King notoriously didn't want Nicholson in the lead role of Jack Torrance, feeling it was too obvious that Nicholson would descend into madness. He'd hoped a more normal leading man might create a starker contrast when the madness set in. But Kubrick overrode King's concerns, and Nicholson's performance in all its unhinged glory became nothing short of iconic. The filming process was notoriously stressful. Kubrick was a perfectionist who could demand upwards of dozens of takes for a single scene, pushing his actors to psychological extremes. Nicholson's reaction? He toggled between intense dedication and cunning ways to slip out of filming for a break. One story goes that he feigned illness one day just so he could sneak away and catch a Wimbledon tennis match in the UK. Cameras caught him in the stands, broadcasting the truth to Kubrick, but Nicholson's too sly a fox to get more than a mild scolding. The result? A performance that is permanently etched into horror film history, overshadowing any behind-the-scenes tussles. The 80s continued to be kind to Nicholson. He scored comedic roles in terms of endearment, playing an astronaut who romances Shirley MacLaine's character. It was a film that managed to tug at heartstrings and amuse audiences in equal measure. MacLaine once said she specifically wanted to work with Nicholson after seeing his meltdown in 5 Easy Pieces, and this collaboration more than delivered. Both she and Nicholson earned Oscars for their performances, further cementing Nicholson as an unstoppable force at award season. By that point, he was racking up nominations like baseball cards, eventually earning more Oscar nods than any other male actor in history. His only near competition might have been someone like Laurence Olivier, but Nicholson's range and longevity propelled him to the top. But no matter how many accolades Nicholson amassed, he never shied away from letting his darker impulses spill out into real life. In 1994, he became the poster child for Hollywood road rage. One day, Nicholson, already having a less than stellar morning, got into a minor traffic altercation with another driver. In a burst of anger, Nicholson grabbed a golf club from his trunk and started smashing the man's Mercedes. It was a headline-making incident that seemed to confirm every rumor of Nicholson's mercurial temper. Despite the drama, Nicholson wriggled out of any major legal consequences, offering what was reportedly an apologetic handshake and a hefty check. Some say around $500,000, though rumors vary. People joked about it as a prime example of Jack being Jack, wealthy enough to settle problems in cash, charming enough to maintain his status as a beloved, if somewhat dangerous, rogue. Just 2 years after that meltdown, Nicholson was entangled in a lawsuit by Catherine Sheehan, who accused him of some very unsavory behavior, offering her money for an encounter, then assaulting her. Nicholson denied the allegations, of course, but the star eventually settled for $40,000, and a judge dismissed further claims. It was a messy footnote in a life that already had plenty of complicated chapters. Around that same period, Nicholson acknowledged a child he had long denied. Actress Susan Anspach claimed Nicholson was the father of her son Caleb, and Nicholson spent years rejecting that assertion. In the late 1990s, however, he finally recognized Caleb as his, forging a tentative relationship. It might have seemed shocking to some that Nicholson, who had always projected such cool self-assurance, would be so reluctant to accept fatherhood. But for him, it was apparently a matter of timing and readiness, neither of which came easily. As the new millennium arrived, Nicholson began taking fewer roles. He was well into his 60s and had accomplished what most actors only dream of. Friends noted that he seemed satisfied, almost tranquil, unhurried to chase projects. He dabbled in comedic and dramatic parts here and there, But after 2010's How Do You Know bombed at the box office, Nicholson quietly withdrew from the limelight. He never officially announced his retirement. There were no press releases or farewell tours, but his absence from new films was conspicuous. Whispers circulated about memory loss or mild confusion on set, suggesting that Nicholson simply didn't feel confident enough to tackle major roles anymore. He never publicly confirmed such rumors, but the speculation has persisted. Zooming back to earlier episodes in Nicholson's love life, one must talk about Angelica Houston. They were a couple for nearly 17 years, an epic romance punctuated by breakups, reconciliations, heartbreak, and betrayal. Houston first met Nicholson at a party at his house. He invited her on a date, then canceled last minute. She grew suspicious only to see him with another woman that evening. Somehow, Nicholson's charm reeled her back in, and their on-off relationship took off from there. It's said that Nicholson's unwavering desire to remain non-monogamous drove Houston up the wall. He had a taste for, well, variety, and that included everything from supermodels to heiresses, from actresses to singers. One of the worst betrayals came in 1989, when he confessed to Houston over dinner that he had impregnated another woman, a waitress named Rebecca Broussard. Houston's fury was volcanic. She allegedly showed up at Nicholson's office afterward and punched him repeatedly, leaving him bruised and sorry, though perhaps not sorry enough to truly change his ways. Nicholson allowed her to vent her rage, later calling it a form of atonement. The relationship ended soon after, but Nicholson moved on with Broussard, fathering two children named Lorraine and Ray, both of whom have tried their hands in acting. Through all the heartbreak, Nicholson famously once said he simply loved the chase, an admission that he struggled with fidelity and monotony. Another footnote in that saga was Nicholson's brief fling with Michelle Phillips, one of the singers from the Mamas and the Papas. The timing was scandalous because Phillips had just divorced Dennis Hopper, Nicholson's Easy Rider co-star and friend. Yet there never appeared to be lasting friction between Hopper and Nicholson. It was the 70s, after all, and the counterculture vibe of the era seemed to extend to the personal lives of these icons. Nicholson's romantic dalliances spanned an entire spectrum of celebrity: Kate Moss, Joni Mitchell, Christina Onassis, you name it. He was the original Hollywood Casanova with a devilish grin to match. At times, the tabloids had a field day, and yet he walked away from each affair with his roguish aura intact. Among the more eccentric chapters in Nicholson's life was his friendship with Marlon Brando. The two lived next door on Mulholland Drive in an area dubbed Bad Boy Drive, which also housed Warren Beatty. The trifecta of Nicholson, Brando, and Beatty was known for womanizing, partying, and their formidable cinematic legacies. Rumor has it Brando once pranked Nicholson by telling him he'd sold his property to Sylvester Stallone. Nicholson freaked out, imagining the tranquility of his home shattered by the roar of raucous parties. Only later did Brando reveal it was an April Fool's joke, leaving Nicholson relieved and possibly plotting revenge. Years later, Nicholson actually bought Brando's house when the latter passed away, choosing to raze the decaying structure and transform the land into a memorial garden. Some called the move philanthropic, others saw it as practical. Maybe it was both. As Nicholson aged, the 1980s gave way to the 90s and 2000s, and he continued enthralling audiences. He took on comedic roles in films like As Good as It Gets, a performance that netted him another Oscar. And each time Nicholson scored a Best Actor win, it was curiously paired with a Best Actress win for his leading lady: Louise Fletcher for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Shirley MacLaine for Terms of Endearment, and Helen Hunt for As Good as It Gets. It's almost as if Nicholson's presence elevated everyone around him. Then, of course, came the role of the Joker in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. Nicholson negotiated an unprecedented deal that included a percentage of the film's box office and merchandise sales. The result? He reportedly made a fortune, further amplifying the myth that Jack Nicholson was as cunning in business as he was in front of the camera. His Joker interpretation was flamboyant, comedic, and chilling all at once, paving the way for future iterations of the iconic villain, but arguably standing alone as a classic. And yet, for all his showmanship, the Nicholson who soared through the 80s and 90s had to reckon with some harsh realities. Rumors circulated that he'd turned down roles later, made famous by Harrison Ford, Han Solo in Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Deckard in Blade Runner, John Book in Witness, though Nicholson has never elaborated in detail. It does raise an entertaining what-if scenario, a world where Nicholson is the roguish smuggler cruising the galaxy alongside Chewbacca, or the fedora-wearing archaeologist outrunning giant boulders. We'll never know how those films might have looked with Nicholson's signature grin, but apparently he felt that grand adventures and sci-fi spectacle weren't quite his comfort zone. And who can blame him? The rebellious or psychologically complex characters he chose seemed tailor-made for his brand of wit and mania. Nicholson didn't limit his unpredictability to film choices or romantic conquests. In 1998, he hopped on a plane to Cuba to visit Fidel Castro. In the face of global criticism over Castro's human rights record, Nicholson reportedly called the dictator a genius. Needless to say, that didn't sit well with many Americans, fueling yet another Nicholson controversy. Was it a publicity stunt, a genuine admiration, or simply the contrarian in Nicholson wanting to do the unexpected? Only he knows. But the uproar was brief, overshadowed by the next big rumor or the next big performance, because Nicholson's life has always been a carousel of swirling headlines. Things slowed down substantially after 2010. Nicholson, who once devoured the party scene and juggled multiple projects, effectively vanished from the public stage. He'd occasionally be spotted at Lakers games, his favorite pastime, wearing sunglasses indoors and offering that easy grin to whoever recognized him. But as for new film roles, they stopped coming. Talk shows joked about him. Fans speculated that he might reemerge for a cameo, but Nicholson seemed to slip into a quiet, almost reclusive routine. Some sources claimed his memory wasn't what it used to be. Others said he just decided he'd done enough and wanted to enjoy a more private life. Whichever version is accurate, it can't be denied that the man who once reigned supreme in Hollywood is now an enigma, rarely granting interviews, rarely making public appearances. Still, the legend lives on every time someone quotes, "Here's Johnny," from The Shining, or references that scorching meltdown in A Few Good Men, "You can't handle the truth." Nicholson's on-screen moments have cemented him in pop culture forever. His personal life, family secrets, paternal denials, bouts of road rage, scandalous affairs, only further stoke the flames of his enduring mystique. Ask any film buff and they'll likely have a personal list of favorite Nicholson roles. Was he better as the cunning patient Randall McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Or the frustrated writer Jack Torrance in The Shining? Perhaps it's J.J. Gittes, the snooping detective in Chinatown who gets his nose cut by Roman Polanski's blade. Or the Joker, cackling and dancing around Gotham in bright purple suits. Each performance is iconic in its own way, and each is stamped with Nicholson's signature unpredictability. Jack Nicholson's career and impact on Hollywood are undeniable. From his chilling performances to his unforgettable characters, he remains one of the greatest actors of all time. While his retirement and health concerns have saddened fans, His legacy will live on through his incredible body of work. What's your favorite Jack Nicholson film or performance? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.